The following sequence was assembled from material of varying quality, so do not adjust your set.
Time Space Visualiser event today, we have a doctor in the house in the form of Colin Baker. How are you, Colin?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm a doctor in my house. Well, I'm in the house or not, I'm a doctor in my house, gazing out the window at the rain today, so you've tacked this very well.
It is quite a moody day today, to be fair. How's lockdown treating you and yours?
Well, it's a bit like being out of work, and actors spend a lot of time out of work in their career. So this is not much different, to be honest. And I avoid going out whenever I can. So I've been catching up on box sets, driving my wife mad, watching things she doesn't want to watch. So we have a compromise. I stay up till 2 a.m, watching all those series I never watched when they went out the first time, like Homeland.
Homeland. I was going to say, what are you binging on at the moment?
Well, I got as far as the current Homeland, but I can't get that at the moment because they've started showing it, and I can't get the first 3 or 4 episodes. So I've got to wait until that's online somewhere. I loved it. What else? I've been watching the OA. I watched with my daughter, which I loved. I'm currently watching, because it's come back, The Last Kingdom, which is a series I like. You can tell what my tastes in television are.
Yes, I've got to be honest. It does seem like sleep patterns are a little bit disturbed all around the country at the moment. I, for one, am staying up and falling asleep in front of box sets on the TV, I think, rather than staying awake. Yeah. So, and then waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning and finding I should really go to bed, I think, at that point. But
I've done that, yeah.
But they are odd times, and I'm quite used to working. I've been furloughed this week, so I've got lots of time on my hands. So I'm not entirely sure what to do with it just yet, but we'll work that out as we go.
I'm sitting in an office that looks like a bomber's hit it, and it looked like that 6 weeks ago. And I said, right, I'm going to tidy my office. And if you could see it, you would see that has not happened.
Well, I think it's possibly a good idea we had the background then for the part of the interview. Okay, so we're going to cover off some of your time on Doctor Who, obviously. It'd be lovely to get your thoughts on some of the things that we're going to go through. Before I do that, though, I wanted to just talk about how the role on The Brothers came about for you, because that was quite a series to be in the 70s, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. It was, well, it was probably the most popular series on television at the time. And I remember that clergymen were complaining because if their sermons went on too long on a Sunday night, around about 7:15, the congregation would slowly depart. Because at 7:25, in the age before VCRs, etc., the Brothers started on a Sunday. And I was as keen on watching it as anybody else. And I had, the previous year, I had done a thing called War and Peace, the first time BBC did it with Anthony Hopkins. And the floor manager on that, who I got on well with, became a producer and was producing The Brothers. And he rang me up at home. And both big jobs I've had, I've been contacted directly by the producer. My agent never got them. He rang me at home and said, "You trained as a lawyer, didn't you?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, we've got a part coming up. It's only 2 or 3 scenes, but I'd love you to do it because it's full of law speak." I said, "Yeah, all right." I said, "Contact my agent." And I turned up and I played Paul Marinier, who was he was a banker. And chance, another character in the series left. They wanted that side of the business side of the programme to be expanded, and they wrote my character up. Now, if I'd been auditioning for that against every other actor in Britain for the best part on television at the time, as it turned out to be, who knows whether I'd have been that lucky. But I snuck in via the back door and had a brilliant 3 years playing the most hated man in Britain.
Yes, that was quite a title to carry forward, really, wasn't it?
Yeah, I've got a picture somewhere, not in this room. I was looking at it the other day, of myself back to back with the original Poldark, Robin Ellis, dressed in Poldark type clothes. He's holding a pistol, and I'm standing there like that, looking arrogant. And he was the most loved, and I was the most hated on BBC at that time.
And then coming forward, then obviously your first part on Doctor Who wasn't actually as the Doctor. You were cast as another nasty little character, actually, in Arc of Infinity.
Just doing his job. That's all. Nasty. He didn't care for the Doctor, and I think anybody who was given the job of head of the guard on Gallifrey wouldn't necessarily care for the Doctor, whoever was playing it. Yeah, that was another one where this time my agent rang up, but he did get me the part of Maxil, and said they've offered you a part in 3 episodes, Doctor Who, and it fits in. I was on tour at the time with that date when you haven't got anything, so it'd be quite nice to do that. I said, oh dear, that means I'll never be the Doctor. I said, what do you mean? I said, well, I read somewhere that they never, when they're casting a new Doctor, look at people who've been in the programme. It's always got to be someone new to the programme. And my agent, my then agent, said, well, they're not going to ask you to be Doctor Who, are they? Thank you. I thought, no, you're probably right. So I agreed to play the part of Maxil in those 3 episodes. Had a great time. Got to meet John Nathan Turner, who was the producer. And in the past, I mean, most producers, they varied. Like any group of people, like actors, like producers cover a whole spectrum. He was at the end of the spectrum, John, of people that I get on really well with. We shared a sense of humour. The first thing he ever said to me was, what's this programme called? And I said, Doctor Who. He said, oh, it's not called Maxil the Guard then. I thought, what do you mean? He said, well, you're playing it, as if you're the most important person on the screen. I said, your point. In our own lives, we are the most important person on screen. Everybody is. We're all, everyone else out there is looking at me, and I'm looking at them. And he said, yeah, but if you could just, let the Doctor have a bit of a scream. And we laughed about it, and he said it was the most arch performance he'd ever seen. And he nicknamed me Archie. He called me Archie for a long while after that. And he and I met at a wedding party soon afterwards and continued our friendship. We laughed a lot. Then he invited me out for lunch, and I thought nothing of it. And it turned out Peter was leaving, and I said, oh, who's taking over? And he said, well, I was thinking you might want to. So by taking the job that meant I wouldn't get the part, I got the part, which is chance. And when people ask me about young actors, sometimes say, you got any advice to give a young actor? And I said, yes, be lucky. Because that's what it's all about. I've seen some brilliant actors, hardly ever work. I've seen some really awful ones who act all the time. Luck is the big ingredient. It's what you look like, whether what you look like is fashionable, whether you get on with the people who are offering you the job. There's so many ingredients. So for any actor to have a career at all is frankly a combination of talent, yes, not always, mostly talent, and luck. And I was lucky.
And there is a certain amount of being in the right place at the right time, for sure. And obviously that happened for yourself there. I mean, obviously you sort of struck up a friendship with John through Arc of Infinity.
You can't engineer. I do know some actors who, if they're at a restaurant like Joe Allen's, which is one of the, the showbiz restaurant, if they see a director of it, they go over, say, hello, how are you? I've never been able to do that. Gratuitous interruption of somebody else's meal. Well, if I was a director, I'd hate it. If somebody came and lent on my ciabatta to say hello. So I'm not going to do it to anybody else.
And it's a difficult time right now, actually, out there right now for all actors and all performers, really, I suppose, because everything's shut down. There's no productions, there's no theatre, there's no TV. So, in many respects, it's a really, really bad time for everybody out there, isn't it?
It's impossible, and it's not going to come back easily either. It's going to. Well, I don't foresee things getting back to normal for a year at least. For us, for actors, theatres. I mean, where is the worse than a theatre where seats are built for midgets who were around in 1830, and you're all crammed in together, no air conditioning, all breathing on each other. Theatres, struggling, heartbreaking. Television, I suppose, will come back. You'll have to produce a certificate of some kind saying you haven't got it. And I suppose if you've been in, you get your certificate, you stay indoors for 2 weeks, and then you turn up, and then you probably won't have it. But the bastard will give it to you. So it's not going to be easy. And I'm in the vulnerable category with age and asthma,
So you're definitely best off staying indoors and not going anywhere for a little while.
I am. I'm talking to lovely people like you via whatever this is. What is it? Zoom.
Zoom, that's right. Yes, we're using the modern technology Zoom, which is, I think, been a lifesaver for a lot of people actually during the last few weeks. I mean, if you look at theatres, particularly, I think they'll be one of the last things to reopen because, even if you could employ social distancing in a theatre production, it's not worth running a West End show if you can only put a quarter of the audience in.
It would be less than that.
Yeah.
I mean, some shows habitually are only a quarter full, but they're not seated, 3 seats in between each person. But then you've got to do the same with the row behind, the row behind that. And then you've got to go to the lavatory. You've got to go to the bar. The bars won't be able to open. It'll be. And what we're doing now will be the answer. People will watch it on. I had because I'm a school governor, I had a governor's meeting a couple of days ago, and we all attended like this, and it was a perfectly good meeting. I don't know why more people don't, because the technology is now so much better. The picture here isn't great because it's a dull day and I've only got a little window, but with a bit of lighting, you can do it perfectly now.
You can, and I think that's how a lot of TV programs in particular will run. And I've seen some terrific theatre actually on live streaming on YouTube over the last few weeks. So yes, it will become the new norm for the while, but there isn't a substitute really for actually going to the theatre in reality, is there?
A Big Finish will. I've already been sent a microphone, so we're going to start doing some stuff down the line in Big Finish, which I'm delighted about.
And again, probably that's something that can carry on going forward because you don't always have to be in the location when you're doing something like a Big Finish.
No, you have to be somewhere where there's good soundproofing, where you've got a good microphone, and the technician at the other end can get a good signal from you. I mean, where I live out in the country, I've got 4 megabit broadband, which is pathetic. And I'm surprised this is holding out as well as it does today. But all you city dwellers, are you a city dweller?
I am, unfortunately.
Go on, what's your speed?
It was 20 the last time I looked.
Yeah, 20. 4 on a lucky day for me.
That makes watching box sets online a little bit more challenging, I feel.
Well, no, it should do, but miraculously, 99% of the time, it doesn't. It's only when my daughter's watching another one upstairs. Turn that off. I'm watching. The last one I watched was a very, very good series. If you haven't seen it, it was on the BBC a few years ago, and it's called The Shadow Line. Shadow Line? Gosh, that was good. Christopher Eccleston was in it. And he's not in everything, is he?
No, he's very choosy about the roles he picks up.
Yes.
So coming back to Doctor Who, because we meandered a little bit there, which is never a bad thing.
I like a meander.
I like a meander as well, don't worry, Emma. We will not hit our time on this one. So you'd had lunch with John, obviously, and the role came along. How much hand did you have in the costume?
None whatsoever. He said, what would you like to wear? And I said, but my first reaction was, why does it have to be a costume? Why doesn't he wear clothes? I'm not wearing a costume today. Are you wearing a costume? No, I'm wearing clothes. It's what I chose to wear today. But I was persuaded that the constraints of budget mean you don't want to have to find, you've got enough to do with monsters and villains and other characters. If the Doctor wears the same thing every week, it makes it so much easier. And then, as he's always getting, covered in mud or rain or bullets or blood, you have 2 or 3 versions of the same costume, and you can do take after take and put it back on again. Whereas if you have to do that with a set of clothes every time, you'll get expensive. So I understood the need for a costume. And then I said, well, can't it just be ordinary looking clothes? No, the Doctor wears a costume. So he gave me a few books, books on design and costume. And I went through them all, and I came back and I said, I described what I would like to wear. And he said, that's exactly more or less what the Master wears. Because I said, all black, maybe a black cloak that you can. I said, well, doing what the Doctor does and has done for 50 years on British, or 40 years then, on British television, 35 years, I don't be accurate. There are occasions, a lot of them, where it's quite handy to be able to disappear into the background and leg it. And something black would assist in that. And he said, no, I think it should be totally tasteless. And he gave a brief to the designer, Pat Godfrey, come up with something totally tasteless. And she kept designing stuff. He said, no, that's just right. I want it tasteless. So she sketched something down and said, what, you mean like that? Thinking he'd say, no, that's going too far. And he said, yep, that's the one. And that's what I got. I never cared for it. Now I'm rather fond of it because it's who old, I call my Doctor Old Sixie. It's who Old Sixie is, really. And when the children nowadays buy the little figures, the Doctor Who figures you can get, and I wanted to get a couple of mine, I couldn't get them. They'd sold out because children like the colourful one. I want the bright one. Not him in grey or him in black, which I had about. So my costume, at least, was popular. Certainly as a toy. And it is viewed from 40 years later, it was very much of its time. It was the 80s. Time of, was it glam rock then, or all that stuff. If you look at the pop music of the time, and there's a couple of pictures on the internet of Nicola Bryant, who played my companion, nipped into Top of the Pop studio next door. And if you see what they're wearing, it's pretty much what she'd been with me in the adjacent studio.
And of course, you came into the series, and Nicola was already a regular at that point, already a companion. So you were joining a group of people who were already established. How did you know Nicola beforehand, or was that the first time you'd actually met her?
The first time I met Nicola was one Friday. It was, get the months right. I'd certainly known that I was going to play the part for several weeks. And John had asked me to not tell anyone, including my agent. He said, don't tell your agent. Don't worry, we'll look after you. We'll sort all the money out when we announce it. At that point, I hadn't even told my agent, which is quite a hard thing to do when ringing up. So I'm suggesting you, oh, have you? Probably if I was you. But I got a phone call on Friday afternoon and said, quick, get your car, drive up to London. Someone's leaked it, so we need to do a press call. So I turned up to do a press call at the BBC in Upper Regent Street, and met Nicola there, and all the pressmen gathered around us, and we did a 1 hour photo session. And at that point, I had neither seen a script, a costume, anything. I was just the actor who was going to do it. Quite a heady feeling. It was rather nice, actually. And Nicola and I think, got on quite well. She was a bit reticent because obviously she'd been with Peter for a while. And Peter, very helpfully, had said to her, oh, Colin Baker, eh? And she said, what do you mean? He said, no, doesn't matter. He's probably changed anyway. No, what about Colin? No, not this. He was doing it deliberately. It was a wind up. And it was quite funny, I suppose. But at the time, it was a bit of a handicap because she was very, very cautious with me. But we gradually warmed to each other. And now, of course, we're besties.
Of course you are, and it comes across as well. It was an odd way to launch, actually, because you came in right at the back end of season 21. So Peter, normally the established way of a doctor sort of regenerating is to get to the end of the season, do the regeneration, and start a fresh season the following year, I suppose. But you had that sort of odd hangover where you were the last story of season 21. So that was a bit of a challenging start, I would have thought.
Yeah, I didn't have the benefit of hindsight, and I didn't have the benefit of knowing an awful lot about how demographics work in television watching. Knowing what I know now, I think I would have advised against it. Because what happened was that I did one story and then disappeared for 8 months. I can't remember how long. Long time.
Would have been about that.
The one story wasn't the greatest. I now realise, I didn't know at the time, actors are not judges of content. We say the lines and do our best. I can see now that while it's not, I don't think it deserved the poll result it got. There was a poll in, I think it was Doctor Who magazine that used to love doing polls. It was a poll saying, what was your best ever story? And that was Caves of Androzani, which was Peter's last story, at which I appeared in the last couple of seconds. What was the worst story? And it was 2011. Worst of thousands of stories. So that was a kind of weight to carry around your neck. The programme itself was going through a period of, I don't know, scrutiny from the BBC, from the world at large. And it needed something. Whether it needed me or not, I don't know, but some people thought it didn't. And that's the time that I arrived. I did one story, and then they all went, and in that story, my doctor was not likable. I mean, that was a brave choice that I approved of. And I've always loved the idea of characters not being all one thing and not being easily identifiable. I know that in my life, my closest friends have been drawn from people I did not like much when I first met them, but they grew on me, and we grew on each other. I can think of 2 or 3 people that I really thought, oh no, I don't like you. And similarly, people you like a lot prove not to be. And I think that could be true of the Doctor. That regeneration has got to have some kind of effect on your body. And on mine, it drove him bonkers. It made Peter's Doctor turn into a kind of passenger, really. They carried him around for about 5 episodes because he was so innovated by the whole thing. So they decided to give me manic energy. So at the end of Twin Dilemma, despite the little wink and I am the Doctor, whether you like it or not, they had seen 2 hours of the Doctor being not a sweet, gentle Peter Davison, but a rather bombastic Sixth Doctor. And they had months of thinking we don't like the Doctor, which was a hard hurdle to overcome.
I remember it well, actually, and I interviewed David Banks a couple of weeks ago, and I suggested to him as part of the interview that I'd almost found your portrayal of the Doctor in the early stages is actually quite alien in its approach, and I think that was the whole sort of figure between you and the difference between you and Peter in that sort of first story that's through it. And you're right, we had 8 months to then think about it and overanalyze it. So, yeah, he didn't see it, he said, but
yeah, well, of course you did. That's the thing you say when you don't want to comment.
Well, he said, would you actually say that to Colin? And I said, I probably would, actually, yes. And there we go. I've actually had a chance to say it to you. So,
well, yeah, I mean, it was alien, and he is an alien. I mean, I even in those days, I was saying, he's a guy with 2 hearts. He's 900 years old. He comes from another race. He happens to have an affection for this planet because that's what the film's being made. Because that's what the BBC is. But he's not always going to behave in the way that, you know, the bloke who lives next door is going to behave. And his reasons might be reasons that you're not equipped to understand. I'm drawing no religious comparisons at all, but, you know, the gods that we have adored over thousands of years, you know, all those Norse gods, and they were horrible, vile people, butchering everybody and demanding, and, you know, we all adored them and loved them and gave them our firstborn. So why you couldn't put up with the Doctor being grumpy a bit for a few episodes? No.
But they more than made up for it with season 22, and I think you had a bit of a humdinger of a season there. Actually, your first full season in the role, you battled Cybermen, you battled Daleks, you battled the Master, you battled the Rani, and you know we threw another Doctor in for good measure as well. I mean, it was a good, solid season.
Yeah, and we met Syl.
Oh, of course, that's right.
The great Doctor villain. And Davros.
I mean, Davros. I mean, Terry Malloy. And I know that the two of you have become firm friends over the years as well. But I mean, the story Revelation of the Daleks is actually it was quite a scary story in many respects. And it's Dalek week for us actually on Time Space Visualiser, so it's kind of good to talk about it. But that was really quite a scary story, quite a dark story.
It was Soylent Green, you know. Eating people is wrong. Those stories. Yeah, it was. I mean, I love stories with Davros because I've done some on audio for Big Video where the Doctor has been reluctantly compelled to go along with the notion that Davros was somehow reformed because he managed to convince everybody else. And the Doctor goes along with it in order to find out, because he's willing to forgive, but it's not impossible that Davros is up to something. And I think those kind of relationships are interesting. It's like anyone who liked Father Brown stories, as I did. Excuse me. Anyone who liked Father Brown stories, the relationship between him and, I can't remember the name of his arch enemy. It was an arch enemy, the father, and in Holmes and Moriarty, in the Sherlock Holmes stories. The idea of someone who's as clever as you and not scenery chewing evil, like, you know, Daleks and Cybermen, they're obvious, but someone who can persuade everybody else, like the Master, who can persuade everybody else that they're, you know, perfectly pleasant people. And the Doctor has to consider. That's the interesting confrontation.
And I always think it's nice. I mean, it's always great, I think, when you've got Davros with the Daleks, particularly in any story. how did you find working with? I mean, the Dalek props, you either like them or you don't. John Pertwee's renowned for having said he hated the Dalek. He hated working with Daleks. How was it for you?
Well, working with them is not great joy. You're aware that inside them there is, sorry guys, got to tell the truth here, there's a man inside them on a plank in my day, I don't know what they're like now, with lots of bolts and sticky out bits inside, gouging parts of their anatomy as they run their feet along the ground, trying to make the damn thing move on 4 casters, which were no different to the ones I had on my armchairs at home. And they could not move very fast. So you couldn't run away from them because, you'd streets away before you turn around. So everything had to be done in pseudo slow motion, to the accompaniment of swearing not under the breath, audible swearing from inside the Dalek as they're mutilating themselves. And, they're kind of hard to work with. But the whole point of them became apparent when finishing the last night, we were up in the bar having a glass of water after the show. And I came back and I went across the empty studio to my dressing room to get my stuff. And it was empty. They had struck all the set, but right in the middle, under the very minimal working lights, was one Dalek sitting there. And as I walked past it, the eye stalk followed me. And I had a shiver of absolute horror. I've got it now, remembering. I was alone in a large, empty, dark space with one Dalek, and it was real. Now, it turned out that the operator had been aware of a squeak all day, and he was inside oiling it. So oil, move, oil, move. But for me, for a brief moment, I saw what the fuss was about. Daleks are scary.